Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So this morning I was on YouTube and I saw Candace Owens doing some interviews on Fox News. And for those of you who don't know, this is a conservative African American woman who is rising through the ranks and is receiving a lot of attention. And recently she had to deal with some Black Lives Matter protesters at one of her events, and she made some statements in response to Black Lives Matter. And I want to just take some time to summarize some of the statements that she made and provide my commentary. But this has become a big deal because Kanye West put out a tweet basically saying that he loves the way Candace Owens thinks. And Kanye West has also made statements about how he admires Donald Trump, which is something I will address at the end of this video. I want to get to Kanye West and what he's doing and his motivations in a second. But basically, this woman, Candace Owens, said this. She said that there's an ideological civil war between Black people focused on the past and Black people who are focused on their future. She also talked about how these activists, she basically said none of them lived through Jim Crow and their grandparents did. She also talked about how they are even more emotional about racism than those who actually lived through it. And then she talked about how you're not living through anything right now. You're overly privileged Americans, basically downplaying racism and suggesting that somehow we're not really dealing with racism right now and it's really not that big of a deal, and that people are overblowing it and they're being overly emotional when they shouldn't be. So let's talk about this first of all. The first thing I'll say is this. Before I even get into some of my responses to her statements, I'll say this. This is a woman who spent most of her life as a liberal. This is a woman who only a couple of years ago decided to become some conservative. So I question her sincerity. I question whether she's real. I question whether or not it's just some media ploy for her to get money, for her to get fame, and her to get attention. So that's the first thing. I don't think that she's a real conservative. Really, I don't. I think that she is deliberately pandering to a crowd of white conservatives, just like a lot of these so-called Black conservatives do, because they understand that there is money in cooning and tap dancing and buck dancing and shoe shining. They realize that they can earn money doing that stuff. It is not a coincidence that you have these Uncle Ruckuses, Uncle Toms, straight up coons, having a meteoric type of rise in social media. It's not by accident, it's by design. So that's the first thing I want to get out the way. The second thing is this. I think that she presented a false dichotomy when she talked about how there are people who want to live in the past versus people who are looking towards the future. I think that that's completely false. Dealing with the problems of the past is essential to addressing the future and planning for the future. You don't have any future without a reflection on the past. People like her want to negate the past. They want to brush over the past. They want to ignore the past. And they do so in order to get acceptance, in order to be embraced by the larger society. But ignoring that past makes it difficult for people to understand what's happening right now. And the past that she is talking about and that she is downplaying the significance of, it is not that long ago when we reflect upon it. There are graphics that have been done to show how long Black people were enslaved. And then they have the graphics of how long Black people were under Jim Crow. And then when you look at it, in the big scheme of things, it's only been about 50-something years since we have had civil rights in this country. It's not that long. And the fact that it has been a very short period of time in which we've had so-called civil rights, that partly explains our condition today. You can't hold a group of people back for hundreds of years and expect them to be able to compete on an equal level with other groups of people. That is why our past is relevant. When we see the current day conditions that plague our community, those current day conditions are a reflection of our past. There's an excellent piece that Ta-Nehisi Coates did a while ago talking about this issue of reparations. You know, he didn't just go back to slavery and just focus on slavery and all that kind of stuff to explain the disparity in wealth. All you have to do is go back to the Jim Crow era of redlining, where black people were denied opportunities to build wealth because of segregation, denied opportunities to purchase homes and stuff like that because of deliberate racism, thereby locking us out of opportunities to prosper. You have a group of people who acquired their wealth off of the free labor of black people. So you have to address that issue if you're going to address these modern manifestations of racism. And then that brings me to this whole point about how she says that black people are overly privileged. She talked about how, you know, the people who are complaining about racism are overly privileged. They're not going through anything right now. To say that we're not going through anything right now is to ignore reality. Tell that to Stephon Clark's family. Tell that to Walter Scott's family. Tell that to Michael Brown's family. Tell that to Trayvon Martin's family. Tell them that we're not going through anything right now. Tell that to Jordan Davis's family. Tell that to the people who are incarcerated today because of the mass incarceration system. Tell that to the black people who receive harsher sentences than white people, that we're not going through anything. Tell that to the black community that is disproportionately poor, that we're not going through anything today. Tell that to our children who are going to inferior second-rate schools today, that we're not going through anything right now. And it goes on and on, whether we're talking about health care, the health disparities, we are going through everything today. Tell that to those people in Starbucks that were arrested for waiting while black. Tell them that we're not going through anything right now. Tell that to the sister who was thrown to the ground and pinned down and threatened with having her arm broken, that we're not going through anything right now. And exposed, she was exposed, her breasts were publicly exposed in the middle of a restaurant. Tell her that we're not going through anything right now. I mean, these people that espouse this stuff, they are delusional. And the only reason why these people receive so much attention is because they are saying what the dominant white media wants to hear black people say. They love these Negro mouthpieces because they use them to negate the struggle of our people. They use them to undermine legitimate movements that are fighting against oppression. And that's what Black Lives Matter is. And despite all these criticism that people have towards Black Lives Matter, they are at the forefront when it comes to this issue of police brutality, an issue that has plagued us since the foundation of the police departments around this country. Since the creation of the police, this issue of police brutality has been an issue. I mean, I remember going to college and seeing the Rodney King tape, seeing that brother beaten like a runaway slave way back then. And here we are in 2018, you know, in a time where you had a black president elected and all this and that. And we see video after video of modern day lynchings of our people. And you have this woman talking about we are not going through anything right now. You know, videotape of the killing of Sam Dubose, videotape of the choking of Eric Garner, all this stuff. And this woman has the nerve to say that we're not going through anything. You need organizations like a Black Lives Matter speaking out against police brutality, lobbying for changes in the laws